This is Jamie Cruz, and I'll be covering Module 8 for EDL 851, Legal Aspects of Teacher Evaluation. The first reading summary was from an NEA article about Every Student Succeeds Act, or the Every Student Succeeds Act. Points from this are that it ended federal government involvement in the teacher evaluation systems, essentially turned it over to the states, even though each school district most times had their own observation and evaluation protocol. So the states now develop their own criteria, and the act also stated that some portion of the evaluation could be based upon student performance, but the evaluations couldn't be made solely on student performance or standardized test scores, etc. The NEA's Teacher Evaluation and Accountability Toolkit was also discussed here. I looked that up, and it was a 177-page document that essentially helped principals when they looked to implement or change an existing evaluation model for their school or school district. The second article was from EdWeek website. It was Teacher Evaluation Heads to Courts. Covered several lawsuits or litigation that have been brought about by teacher unions or teachers with union support who basically disagree with the different aspects of the evaluation process or the outcomes of those evaluations that the school districts performed. It was kind of interesting reading through these, the different violations. Some of them involved when schools or districts would use test scores to impact raises or job status. Basically, if you retain a teacher, we're not taking into consideration how poverty levels impact the student achievement scores or student achievement, as we know that fluency a lot of times can be a major impact on student achievement, and also inconsistent rating on different evaluations. And one of those is the one I looked up from the court case. Looked more into the Letterman versus King. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Lederman or Letterman. She was a fourth grade teacher who took legal action. Essentially, the union took legal action against members of the New York State Education Department, I believe the commissioner and the assistant commissioner of education. She was given a growth score on one of her evaluations of 1 out of 20, which is considered ineffective, obviously. But the previous year, she was given a growth score of 14 out of 20, which in their model was considered effective. When looking at the information throughout the litigation, it looked as though the 2 years were not identical, but really, really close with the student scores. And actually, as she brought up, submitted several affidavits from noted universities, professors within those universities, and even the building principal. And she had a clinical or school psychologist and statistical and research consultant, along with parents and students. All these affidavits basically supported her, and also pointed to the fact that her test scores, or students' test scores, actually performed quite well in comparison to those throughout the state. So the court ended up ordering that growth score, that 1 out of 20 growth score, and her ineffective rating be vacated from her records. So that was an interesting case to look up. There was a lot of detail when I just Googled that case. So the other reading, continuing with the reading summary, was another one from EdWeek website, teacher evaluation, basically an overview, and kind of had to deal with how to use the evaluation, teacher evaluation, in use those results fairly, and then what to do with those results from those evaluations. So again, while the evaluation process is governed by the state laws, each school district kind of has its own version of teacher evaluations. A lot of them are similar, but they don't. There's not a one state evaluation that's used all the time. So teacher effectiveness comes into focus with this evaluation process, and then reviews were many times were given little thought or effort, and so they needed to be taken seriously and done in a manner that would help the teachers. Not in a way that would just look to get rid of teachers or but really help the teachers become better in their job to serve the students. Student achievements taken into consideration regarding evaluations. Of course, we discussed that earlier. The newer models attempt to take out the biases that can exist in student achievement scores or test scores. And then reviews were many times given, again, a little thought or effort. I have that on there twice, actually. But I think that in my experience, I felt that a little bit. It seems like, I haven't gotten the feeling that observations were done in which they're really, really, really looking for things to make you a better teacher. I know that the administrators have a lot of observations to do, and maybe I've just been lucky and haven't been given a lot of things to work on. But I think those were things that made me think. As we look at our own evaluations, and I actually went back and read through those over the past few years. It was kind of interesting. So our evaluation process, we actually have documents. I looked this up. Each teacher establishes annual goals. We have an annual professional goal sheet that we look at, and we select a couple areas that we select as goals, and kind of expand on how we want to go about that. And then, so certified staff in the first 2 consecutive years are evaluated twice per year and at least once each semester. And it's listed at no later than the 60th day of school. And then 3rd and 4th years is 1 evaluation per year, and as to occur no later than February 15th. And then after your 4th year, you're to be evaluated at least once every 3 years. And again, that February 15th is the date used. So there's a pre-observation conference scheduled by the administrator who's going to be performing the observation. And then there we kind of discuss the objectives and goals. Maybe you talk about the best day to come in. They certainly don't want to come in on just a simple review day. They want to see where you're actively teaching, preferably some new content or relatively new content where they can see the teaching methods happening. So after that pre-observation meeting, they'll have the planned observation, and that's not to do away with any other informal observations. It shouldn't impact that. But then after the observation, the formal observation, then there's an eval conference scheduled, and that would be the time in which, if they felt like things weren't going satisfactory, they would put in their file the professional improvement plan if they deem that necessary. So the formal eval is signed by both the observer, the administrator, and the teacher. And then the teacher would have 2 weeks in order to respond in writing regarding the evaluation conference. So if the teacher doesn't agree with the evaluation that they're given, a review by the superintendent can be requested in writing. That has to be within 2 weeks of the evaluation process. Again, I've found in my personal experience, I've had good evaluations. I know there's been some instances in our district where they've had poor evaluations, and again, one instance where they had a good evaluation and then a poor evaluation the next cycle, and they were actually terminated, and they were a beginning teacher. So I know that brought up some concerns within the teachers and the organizations that we belong to. So thankfully I haven't had to go through anything of that nature, but it is a concern. I think in hindsight, um, I think student achievement had a play in that sense or instance. But again, my experience with the evaluation process here has been good. I've been given some good pointers, and I do like the fact that we do have goals that we set to try to reach, throughout the evaluation process. One thing that I've touched on at least one other time in one of the assignments was that I'd like to see maybe some specific goals per, maybe per um, class, maybe even per department probably would be more realistic. Because certainly the chemistry department and the physical education department would be completely different in probably the goals that they're trying to achieve. So that's something that as a future administrator that I would maybe look at having departmental goals and then include that in the evaluation process. So thank you for listening.